My name's Cameron Kelshaw, and I did my research paper on the impact of the Warren Court, which was the Supreme Court of the United States from 1953 until 1969 under Chief Justice Earl Warren. Um, they were a revolutionary court, and in my paper, I talk about how they are second or equal to the Marshall Court of the early 1800s, which kind of created the law and interpreted the law for the first time. And then the Warren Court reworks the law to fit an evolving and changing society, which was in that time period of the 1950s and 60s. So Earl Warren was nominated to the Supreme Court by President Dwight David Eisenhower. He was confirmed and served 16 years. Before that, he was the governor of California, as well as being an attorney general and former presidential nominee. Um, he was a lot more liberal than originally anticipated. He was supposed to be a bit conservative on the court with their rulings, but the Warren Court would be known as one of the most revolutionary courts and for being very activist in their rulings. So the next slide, this is just a little bit about the members of the Warren Court. There were 17 total in about 16 and 17 years, so about one change a year on average for members of the court. And now I'm going to go through the cases that I talked about in my paper. So there's 6 cases that I talked about, and each has a lasting impact on our lives today, and changed a lot for the rights of people at the time that they were made. So the first one, I'm sure everyone has heard about. This was in 1954, so the first year of Chief Justice Earl Warren's uh, time on the court. This informally overturned Plessy versus Ferguson, which was a previous case that ruled segregation was not unequal in integrated public schools. And because of this, it really kind of got the civil rights movement going. It was a catalyst for change. Um, and something interesting about this case is Justice Hugo Black was a former KKK member from Alabama, and in this case, he voted to overturn legal segregation. Um, and this, of course, gives us the education system we have today with people of many different backgrounds. And the next case also involves segregation and discrimination. This was Loving versus Virginia. In this case, a white man had married a black woman in Washington, D.C., which was legal. And then they returned to their home in Virginia, where the police raided their house. At the time, 40 out of 50 states had some law against interracial marriage. And this, you know, was used as precedent in Obergefell versus Hodges, which was a 2015 case legalizing gay marriage. So this case is very important for both um, African Americans, minorities, anyone involved in an interracial relationship, but also homosexuals and people who would later get marriage rights. The next case is Baker versus Carr. This was a 1962 case involving the malapportionment of districts in Tennessee. Basically, the districts had not been redrawn in over 50 years. So some districts had 40,000 people and some districts had 10,000 people. So the votes count were weighed differently, basically. And this said that one person would equal one vote, and that the state legislatures and government had to do their best to make sure that the districts were even in size. And it also overturned kind of the political question of courts ruling on voting rights. Previously, this was seen as something that was a political question, meaning that it was outside of their bounds within the Constitution. And then this would later lead to Reynolds v. Sims, which I just talked about. So this was important for people with voting rights. And then the next case was Tinker v. Des Moines Independent School District. This involves students wearing black armbands to school in protest of the Vietnam War. The students would be suspended and then their parents would bring suit. So this was important because before, pretty much, your constitutional rights as a student at a public school were forgotten about when you walked through the schoolhouse door. But this said, you have limited rights when you go to a public school. The school is still able to curtail certain behaviors such as obscenities, speech involving violence, things like that. But this speech was declared not to be obscene. It did not cause a distraction, which is a big thing with being in public school. And this also said that speech could be nonverbal. So this was important with Texas versus Johnson, in which speech protected includes burning of the American flag. In this case, the guy burned the American flag and was arrested, but that was later overturned because it was speech, which is protected. Griswold v. Connecticut. I know that Taylor is doing some research on this and wrote his paper about this. So this is just a part of my research. It's not the whole thing. But this was important. It was the right to privacy, which was previously not talked about on the Supreme Court because it is not within the Constitution. However, their argument was that if you kind of read between the lines and use the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, and the 14th Amendment, that the right to privacy is in there, including unreasonable searches and seizures and things like that. And this was important too for women, as it had paved the way for Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood of southeastern Pennsylvania. So Roe v. Wade legalized abortion. At the time, a woman could not receive a legal abortion in many states, and Roe was in Texas. And then Planned Parenthood of southeastern Pennsylvania had kind of three things that were looked at, including whether or not a minor should have to get parental consent before getting an abortion, whether a husband had to be made aware of if his wife was getting an abortion, and then if there was a 24-hour waiting period. So this was kind of done by Sandra Day O'Connor, justice on the court. This was after Warren's time, but Griswold led to this and created the undue burden standard, which said that the government could not create a substantial burden to obstruct women from getting an abortion. So with that case, they said that the telling of a husband was an undue burden. And because it was the woman's body, she did not have to tell her husband she was getting an abortion. But the 24-hour waiting period was not an undue burden, nor was the informing of a parent by a minor. And the next case is Miranda v. Arizona. So I know everyone's heard of Miranda rights and that sort of thing. So before then, criminals, did not have to be informed of their Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination, so they could be kind of made to incriminate themselves and put themselves in jail pretty much. And this required that police officers be informed of their Miranda rights, as you've all heard on Law and Order. And suspects that invoke their Miranda rights are less likely to be convicted. I have some tables and graphs in my paper that show that if you remain silent and wait for your lawyer, you're less likely to go to jail, and that the more you're encountering the police as a suspected criminal, the more likely you are to remain silent. So this was important just for a criminal procedure. A lot of people at the time were not happy with making it harder for police officers, but it has been pretty important for protecting the rights of the accused and maintaining that people are innocent until proven guilty. So that about sums it up for me. I looked at these 6 cases just because I knew that they were important for the world we have today. Um, Justice Warren was able to take a diverse group of people on the court of justices and unite them together, even when they didn't initially agree. Sometimes the court needed to make a statement by having a unanimous decision, and if someone didn't agree, it made the court look kind of weak. But with Justice Warren, he was able to unite the members of the court and bring them all together so that they could have a single vote. Thank you.